Greetings!
So Halo is 25 years old. Oh, my bones! Ugh. And man, did it really crawl to get to that 25. So me and Halo, we've had our ups and downs. Halo used to be my franchise, my all-time favorite franchise. And during the Bungie days, I was obsessed with these games. From the lore, the gameplay, the variety, the aesthetic. You know, I put at least tens of thousands of hours in each of these games, especially the Bungie ones. And even during the 343 days, I stuck with these games for a while. And then about 2 years into Infinite, I just got so tired of that downward spiral, the negativity, and just the lack of content, and just constantly be put on waiting, that I just finally decided to move on. And, you know, for 3 years, I haven't really touched or talked much about Halo. And I got a little cozy with another franchise that ended up becoming my new GOAT. Now, I'm back talking about Halo, and you might be wondering, after taking such a big break from the franchise, what made me want to come back, especially for this remake? Well, originally, I wasn't really thrilled with the idea that after 5 years since we last got a new Halo thing, that the next Halo game would be a third redo of Halo CE. But with the last trailer we saw, there were actually enough things with it that I was actually kind of excited. I saw space battles, which is a thing I really wanted, you know, new missions, finally some new lore content. You know, we got more skulls, including a third-person skull, which after playing Requiem and seeing that you can go first person or third person, I really wanted to have that kind of experience with Halo, so that was cool. And, you know, just, yeah, I'll use an excuse to just try Halo again. Figured it'd be something nice to play with the boys. And, you know, I need something to justify my Game Pass subscription, so why not? And more importantly, I was just kind of curious what this remake would do to really stand alone from the OG game and how it could improve it, because this might be a hot take. Halo CE is not my favorite Halo game. I really like the game. It is probably like an 8 out of 10 for me, but I didn't grow up with CE like a lot of people did. I didn't start the franchise till Halo 2 and 3, and I wouldn't go on to play CE till after I got to like ODST. So there were a lot of expectations I already had for Halo games going into CE, and I know CE was a super influential game. You know, it not only established this amazing world and franchise, but it did a lot of things for the gaming industry, from introducing things like the 2-weapon limit, shields, console controls for shooters. It had advanced AI, it introduced the Holy Trinity gameplay style. It really was a groundbreaking game, but I was already used to a lot of that with Halo, and there were a lot of things that I felt were lacking in Halo 1 that I loved about Halo 2 and 3 and onward. You know, like being able to switch weapons with Marines, honking the horn with the Warthog. You couldn't use things like the energy sword, which baffled me. And also, I just thought the second half of the game was a little repetitive. So with this remake, with them saying they're going to change some stuff, I was curious to see what they could do for the game. But why did I feel the need to make a review for this game? Because I don't normally do reviews for this channel, as you all know. There has been a lot of criticism with this game, which, no surprise, it seems like every Halo game nowadays is analyzed under a microscope for flaws, because no Halo game is ever going to reach the peak of 3 in Reach, but we all want to believe.
Whoa, dude, calm down. We're Halo fans.
Okay, well, what kind of Halo fan are you?
Well, I replayed Halo 4 last week, and I actually liked it.
Dude.
But there has been a lot of, honestly, kind of exaggerated or downright stupid criticism. This game has issues, and I will cover them, but I have seen a lot of just clickbaity, oh, this game is woke, Cortana looks like Germa, a lot of misinformation, and unfortunately, I feel like it's drowning out the more valid criticism that could benefit both this game and the overall franchise going forward, and it just paints an ugly picture for the entire Halo community. And I don't think it's just the critics, I think there's even a lot of toxic positivity where people are shooting down genuine criticism. But at the same time, I see people who are satisfied with the way the game is and are just trying to have fun, and people who nitpick over the dumbest, most nitpicky stuff have to spoil the party for people. Because while I do have a lot of issues with this game, I also think this game does a lot of things right that people aren't giving it credit for. But it's like, I think this is a solid game with some problems. But unfortunately, a lot of those reviews are just super exaggerated, and I just wanted to throw a more fair review into the pile, maybe to filter things out and maybe clear up some misinformation I've seen around the internet. So with this review, for context, I've done a couple playthroughs now. I've done a full-on normal playthrough, a more goofy, like, remix playthrough with a lot of skulls on, including the third-person skull. I've replayed numerous missions a couple times over for both clips for this review and for hunting skulls and terminals, and I replayed all the bonus missions again with a buddy on Heroic. And later I plan to do a legendary playthrough with that same buddy and another buddy. So I feel like I have enough here to talk about, but the big question, is this game a fresh restart for Halo, or is all the hate justified? Let's get into it.
Bridge to Cryo 2. This is Captain Keyes. Send the Master Chief to the bridge immediately.
Captain, we'll have to skip the weapons diagnostics and
On the double, crewman.
Aye, aye, sir. The skipper seems jumpy. We'd better get moving.
Alright, so first off, I want to kind of cover more so the presentation of the remake, because that's kind of the thing a lot of people are going to be coming to this for, is the fancy new graphics and more modern tech. So with this section, I'm going to talk about graphics, performance, audio, cutscenes, the story, any bugs or glitches I ran into, the levels, some cool Easter eggs, and maybe some other stuff. And some of my biggest praises and criticisms are with this section, which is why I wanted to start with it. So let's first talk about the main selling point of this game. This is Halo on Unreal Engine 5, which is an engine that has both a lot of people who praise it and a lot of critics. So it was very curious to see how Halo would run on this, because some people I know were worried about them switching to Unreal Engine 5 because sometimes it could be a very buggy engine and a lot of games are using it, which is kind of killing like the sense of like games having their own identity and looking very similar. But if you followed Infinite, you know that that slipspace engine did not help the series a lot either. So the idea of them switching to an engine that more developers are familiar with, honestly, I feel like that was a worthy sacrifice, because that slipspace engine, they spent more time fixing it than actually adding to it with Infinite. But with Unreal Engine 5, I gotta give credit. This engine looks gorgeous. There were even moments where I had to just turn off the HUD to really just soak it all in. It's like, this engine looks gorgeous, like the textures, and especially the things I really want to give attention to are like the explosion and plasma effects, the lighting, and especially the more outdoor environments. I think all of these look incredible. Like when plasma grenades and explosions are going off like back to back, like the game just looks insane. Some of the lighting, and more so just how this game actually does a good job like recreating CE's like tone with its lighting compared to like say the Anniversary, which when that remastered CE, it made everything way too bright and saturated. And even just like the outdoor environments with stuff like when you first land on Halo and you're driving around in your Warthog, that just looks incredible. And this was especially the case for the later missions, because as I said, one of my issues with CE, the original, was when I always replay CE, I always think to myself like, man, this game is so fun. Why don't I replay this as much as 2, 3, ODST, or Reach? And then I get to that second half and I realize, I guess because they were crunching for time, they literally just recycled the first half of the campaign, but they just made you go in reverse for each mission and added Flood. So it kind of felt like you were just already replaying the game, even though you were only halfway through it. And there were also a lot of repeating rooms, which made the game at best redundant or repetitive, and at worst, like sometimes you would get lost. But with these later missions, they added more flood biomass to really like sell the flood are infecting these areas, but also giving them a brand new aesthetic and making some of the rooms actually feel different so you can actually identify where you're going. And even stuff like the final mission, the Maw, when you revisit the Pillar of Autumn, they actually did a much better job really selling that this ship has crashed, it's torn apart, it's on fire, some parts of it are buried in the sand, and it just looks really cool. And I'm definitely going to talk about these missions more when I get to my gameplay section, but these missions might end up becoming some of my favorite missions of this campaign now for this version. And on top of that, I also want to just shout out some really cool Easter eggs, both returning and some new ones. Obviously, the Linda Easter egg from Anniversary came back, which if you are into the books, that's going to be a pretty cool one. If you're into the books, a couple other cool ones are like, they referenced Marine, who I guess Guilty Spark thought was the Reclaimer and brought to the library before Chief. He got a cool shout out. There is an Easter egg from the original where, while you're fighting the Flood, there's a section where it looks like Marines and Jackals basically set aside their differences and fought to the end, and it was cool that they brought that back. When you get to Keyes after he's been infected by the Flood, if you look behind him, you can kind of see the starting formation of a proto-Gravemind. I thought that was really cool. Our boy Craig got an Easter egg in this, which I thought was funny. And for the bonus missions, I don't know if this counts as an Easter egg, but there is a cool section where you get to see elites actually doing sword training. I will admit the AI is kind of janky with this. Their tactics show they definitely need some more training, but it was cool to see like elites actually doing some like training and traditional like sparring stuff. I thought that was really neat. Speaking of AI, I do want to talk about the AI, at least from the presentation standpoint. I'll go more in depth about them during the gameplay section, but yeah, I would say a lot of the enemies and Marines look pretty good. But I will admit, for them, there are some janky animations, especially for stuff like when the Marines die, they have these like weird ragdoll like proportions, like their arms are twisted in ways they shouldn't be, or their legs. And then with the Flood, I noticed like when you kill the Flood, sometimes like when their bodies blow up, there's some chunks, but a large portion of their bodies just despawn right on the spot. Looks kind of weird. And, you know, there's a few other things, like sometimes like elite AI are like stuck standing in place, stuff like that. I will say one thing I like about the AI though. I like that they still let us kill Sergeant Johnson. that always like makes me laugh, because like he's this character that's supposed to be alive throughout the games, but you can just kill him whenever you want. Especially, I would say that's the best thing about the bonus missions, is because he's with you the whole time, you can straight up just kill him anytime, even when he's given like impactful speeches, and it's just always hilarious.
You're wondering if you got the guts to fight after what you've been through. You think those Covenant bastards broke you? Hell no! You...
Not bad, Spartan. I'm almost starting to believe the propaganda.
I will say one genuine criticism I have with the game on the presentation front is the HUD additions. Now, I'll go a lot more in depth with the gameplay section about the additions, but as far as presentation, one thing that annoys me is all these new HUD elements that I feel like just clutter the screen and make the game feel so much more handholdy. Like now, for example, there's so many icons for like these blue squares that hover over every weapon that you can pick up. A lot of times when you're fighting enemies, when you get to the last couple, they'll have red diamonds over all their heads. They're just a mild annoyance because it's like they're just spoiling where the last couple enemies are. But this is never really that kind of game where you struggle to find the last couple enemies. But what's really annoying about them is when you're dealing with the invisible elites, they straight up just rat out where they are, so it kind of defeats the purpose of invisible elites. Some other annoying things, I do think hit markers are kind of annoying, because we don't need hit markers. The enemies already react or have their shields react when you shoot at them. You don't need an additional indicator of whether or not your shots are landing. And honestly, the same thing with those blue squares over the weapons. Like, every time you walk over a weapon, you see the weapon icon and press X to pick up. You don't need additional information for that. And, you know, there's other stuff too, like the nav markers. Those I don't have a problem with, because even the original game had those. And besides for that, like, everything else, luckily you can turn off, which is good, because once I turned a lot of that stuff off, and I also like repositioned where the motion tracker was back to how it was in the original, I would say like the much more clean HUD like made the game feel a lot more tolerable. Like, I didn't feel like I was having my hand held as much, and I was able to really appreciate the visuals a lot more. But some of those, it's just too much. It's the term, the yellow paint, you know, it's like we have to tell the gamer every single thing of what to do because we don't trust them to figure it out for themselves. I'm glad they at least give you the option to change that. There's some games where they would just be like, oh, you don't like that? Go fuck yourself. So I'm glad they at least give you the option to do that. And even like the skulls will give you additional options to customize your game, like bringing the AR back to its classic 60 rounds, or being able to disable things like sprint if, you know, that really ruffles your jimmies. On that note, I do want to talk about a couple glitches. Now, surprisingly, this game ran pretty well for me. There's not too much I had to complain about as far as performance issues. I've only ever had one like crash, and that was when my friend's game froze during one of the bonus missions. But other than that, like, the game's ran pretty good, but there were a couple glitches. Most of them weren't game breaking, but there were, I think, two that were a little concerning that they should fix. Speaking of the 60 round skull, there is a legitimate issue with that skull where if you have that enabled, none of your Marines or even enemies holding an AR will be able to shoot the AR anymore. It's like their AI doesn't know how to react to the extra ammunition. So any mission where you're relying on your Marines, they're just not gonna fight, and that's a serious issue. Also, I've had mixed results with the active camo. I feel like the enemies just always know where I am, even with that turned on. Besides for that though, there aren't too many like serious issues, more just like little funny stuff. Like, after using the camo, my AR had a weird visual glitch. I know, especially in the remix mode, sometimes the AI will just get stuck in areas, especially when it's in remix and there's enemies that weren't normally in those missions. They don't know how to react to leaving doors and stuff. One weird thing that I've noticed with not just this game, but even with the Gears E-Day beta, is for both games, as soon as I downloaded the game and booted it up for the first time, for some reason, the menu narrator is turned on by default, and this was like a jump scare for me. I was like, what the hell is that?
Loading settings. Previous tab left bumpers. Previous tab left bumper.
Gears of War, E-Day multiplayer beta. Logging in. Initial setup. Accessibility.
And I immediately like wasted no time turning that off. I guess this goes in the same camp as motion blur of why are games leaving this shit on by default, because most people turn this off. But at least with motion blur, that's like more of a preference. But with the menu narrator, I'm pretty sure 90% of people do not want this. Like, stop leaving this on by default. I don't know why that was the case, but that was just the case. And yeah, that's about it really. Off the top of my head, I think there was like one section in the flood mission where the filter went from a green filter to a blue filter, depending on where you stepped. That was a little weird, but yeah, other than that, didn't really have a lot of technical issues. Where I did have a lot of issues, and this is probably more of a preference thing, is the audio. A lot of the weapon sound design and even some other sound design, I thought it was at best kind of weak or quiet, and at worst just non-existent. I don't know, maybe I was spoiled with Halo Infinite, because with a lot of my problems with that game, one thing that game did really well is it had stellar sound design. Like, all the weapons sounded beefy. If you jumped from a very high height, you could hear a big thud when you land. Punches sounded meaty. I cannot say that about much in this game. I am starting to come around to some stuff, like the AR sound effect. But yeah, like the sniper sounds weak, the BR sounds lame, the Magnum, oh my god, look how they massacred my boy. The Magnum, I miss that classic Magnum sound. It's just rough. And yeah, it's like, you punch enemies and you almost don't even hear a sound effect. I'm just not a fan. And sometimes even the music can kind of sound quiet. Yeah, the audio, I was not impressed this time around. One thing that I wasn't only not impressed, but actually hated, besides for a few exceptions, was the cutscenes. Now, visually, as far as like textures and stuff like that, I think the cutscenes look great. I do wish they were in-engine, but I understand wanting to do just cutting to video file cutscenes, especially if they look good. And I will admit, from first glance, they look great. In fact, there's a couple cutscenes that I genuinely love, like the Jenkins cutscene for 343 Guilty Spark. That is an exception to the rule where I thought everything from voice acting, direction, animation, and visuals was just 10 out of 10 spot on. Like, I wish all the cutscenes were done of this quality. In fact, it was done so much better than the original, I think it had enhanced the tone and experience. I'll even say I liked the cutscene change with Keys killing the two hunters with the spirit. That was pretty cool. Oh, and I even liked that they actually showed him inside of the spirit and showed how you actually control that, because I always wondered that, like, how do you even drive one of these things? But now I know that was neat. But a lot of the cutscenes suffer from really janky animations, just bad direction. Like, there's a lot of awkward pauses of characters just standing around like they're waiting for the music cue to finish, or sometimes the music cue doesn't line up. They're just poorly directed, and I'll go more in depth with this with like the voice acting, but yeah, some of them just look bad, including one from the bonus missions that, trust me, we're gonna rip on that later when we talk about the bonus missions, but yeah, some of these are just not good. Like the one of Johnson talking to the Marines in the beginning of the game, that was like a first draft. Now, I heard a rumor that the studio that was working on those cutscenes pulled out before they could finish and someone else had to take their place. If that's true, that explains a lot. But like, guys, where was Blur Studios? Dude, Blur Studios is doing God's work right now. Like, why weren't they brought back? Were they just too big now for Halo? Which I wouldn't be too surprised, honestly, but yeah, and the only other disappointment is like, there are some minor cutscenes that were straight up just cut out. Like when Chief interacts with a Forerunner bridge for the first time, or the Marines use the grav lift on Truth and Reconciliation. I get what they were trying to go for as far as like, we now have the technology where we don't need a cutscene in between so we can load in the new level. Like now we can seamlessly go from the ground up the grav lift into Truth and Reconciliation, or we can just turn on the bridge on the spot and you can just take your Warthog through. But there was that sense of whimsical mystery and charm that those cutscenes gave that I do feel was kind of lost by not doing that. So that was a bit of a bummer. In fact, while we're on this topic, let's now transition to talking about the story. Now, I do want to give a spoiler warning, not so much for the base game, because this game's 25 years old. Any important spoilers you were worried about have probably already been discussed ad nauseum. As far as any changes, additions, or especially the prequel bonus missions, that I will give a spoiler warning. So I'll put a timestamp for where to skip if you don't want to hear that stuff before you play the game. But yeah, let's talk about the base story first, and then we'll talk about the additional stuff after. So as far as the base campaign, there really aren't too many changes. It's more or less the same story, but they did add something that I actually really liked. So they added a little bit more character development between Keyes and Chief, which apparently in the novels, there's a lot more time with those two together. So I'm glad that they kind of flushed this out in the original game, because in the original game, they definitely had this sense of friendship, but despite that, they only have such brief moments together. But in the remake, during the scene where Keyes is giving Chief his pistol, instead of his admittedly iconic, like, I don't keep it loaded, son, you'll have to find ammo as you go scene, they actually changed it to basically him telling Chief, like, in case I don't make it, here's my pistol, give it to my daughter. And I like that this pistol actually has a bit of a mini arc on its own. Like, later when you rescue Keyes in Truth and Reconciliation, Chief tries to give it back to him, and Keyes is just like, yeah, I know I picked the right person for it, you should hold on to it. And then later in the game, in fact, toward the very end of the game, when Chief is making his big escape, in the original, the escape pretty much went great once he got to the longsword, but in the remake, he actually gets jumped by a flood tank, and it's that very pistol that saves his life. So I thought that was a cool little mini arc for this pistol that Keyes gave Chief, and I'm speculating that if they do a remake for 2, he'll probably give that to Miranda, and then if they do a remake of 3, during her death scene when she is having a standoff with the brutes with the shotgun and the pistol, I assume that pistol will be the one that she has in her hand. So if that is the intention they're going with, that's a neat little subtle addition that also adds a little bit of character depth for Chief and Keyes, like the sense that Keyes trusts Chief to give this to his daughter. Like, I like that. That was a neat, cool addition. But as far as like any other changes, like some of the actors, both old and new, do re-record their lines for the main characters. A lot of the NPCs still have their same lines from 25 years ago, but a lot of the main cast actually re-recorded their lines. Now, Keyes, Chief, and 343 Guilty Spark, I thought they were still just about as good as I remembered them being. But for some reason, Johnson and Cortana were very odd, and I don't blame the actors, because for Johnson, his old voice actor retired, so naturally they had to get someone else. And to his credit, I do think this new guy, he has the voice of Johnson, but it's the way they both animate him and direct the voice actor. He just comes off like almost more of a parody of himself. Like, there's a lot of moments where he has these awkward pauses, and when he says like a funny line, he stares at the camera like there's supposed to be like a laugh track. Yeah, that I blame on the direction, and especially with Cortana, because Jen Taylor, I don't need to justify why Jen Taylor is a good actress for Cortana. She's voiced her throughout the entire series. We know she can do good work. But for some reason, her dialogue re-recordings in this are, honestly, I'm gonna say it, they're awful. There's some where it's like, I don't mind them, like she gives a slightly different tone or direction, but it's fine. But there's some where it's just like, she just sounds uninterested. There's a couple that I'll play here, for example, where it's just like, in the original game, she sounded like she had a lot more passion, or was more energetic or concerned. And in the remake, she just sounds almost more agitated, annoyed, or just monotone.
Now would be a very good time to leave. Now would be a very good time to leave. Knew it. The Autumn's accelerating. Keyes is going in manual. I knew it. The Autumn's accelerating. Keyes is going in manual. No human life signs detected. The captain, he's one of them. It's not him. Not anymore. The captain, he's one of them. We can't let the flood get off this ring. You know what he'd expect. What he'd want us to do. We can't let the flood get off this ring. You know what he'd expect. What he'd want us to do.
I was not impressed with her performance in this. And also, during in-game, it seems like they added a lot of in-game dialogue that, again, felt very hand-holdy, very, and I'm gonna use Zanny's quote here, very yellow paint dialogue.
Using our lifeboat airlocks to attach their boarding craft, we go out and they come in. Clever bastards. That's a Covenant overshield. I've created an interface patch that will let you use the device to augment your shields.
You know, I don't need Cortana to explain to me, like, how an overshield works or how invisible elites work. Like, I've played this game 100 times. This game came out when I was barely even a baby. So it's like, I know what I'm doing, alright? If I can get through it in middle school, I could get through it now. I definitely think in both cases, it was just a case of bad direction. Just like with the cutscenes in general, because a part of their performances is also just impacted by the facial animations and just the direction, especially those awkward pauses where they're just standing in place not doing anything. Other than that though, you know, the rest is the similar story you know and love, and for the most part I think Halo 1 does a good job establishing his story. So besides for that, I don't really have any real complaints. As for the prequel missions, this is where things get more interesting because this is brand new lore. So they really had a chance to give us some good stuff here. And I'll start positive. There are some neat ideas. I do like that we get more moments of Chief and Johnson together. These guys are always like sort of a tag team, so it was nice to get a mission where we actually see them together interacting, and there are some wholesome moments, especially this one moment that was both really silly but also like kind of cute.
Chugga chugga. Choo choo.
But as far as like interesting lore ideas, there are a couple things. So you have this new sub-faction of Covenant called the hold on, I gotta look at my notes here. The Sacristan Order. Yeah, it's like this very royal guard look, very like a lot more purple or white and gold. It actually looks really nice. I actually really like it. And you get to see some cool stuff. Like I mentioned, the elites training. I thought that was really cool. But also, apparently, the Prophet of Harmony and the sub-faction are doing like Covenant experiments. And you go into this room with all these like experiment tanks, and it's kind of interesting what Halo Studios is doing here. They have a lot of elites, jackals, and brutes, but for the elites and jackals especially, it's their Halo 4 and 5 designs. So I'm curious if this is supposed to be a retcon, or if they're trying to say that like those elites and jackals and all those redesigned Covenant you guys hated, well, they're actually in lore abominations. I think that's probably not the case, because even characters like the Arbiter were kind of redesigned a little bit in that style when we got to Halo 5, so I don't know, maybe it's a retcon. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. And you know, there's also the interesting subplot of the Covenant kidnapping Marines from planets that they glass, and they throw them in these hunting grounds and hunt them for sport. You know, these are all neat ideas. The problem with these missions though is they don't really dive in deep enough to any of these ideas to give us some actual substance, and in the end of the day, everything just accounts to filler, because the whole point of this mission is Chief and Johnson are trying to get data on the Covenant homeworld, which is High Charity, and they do get it, but that doesn't really matter because there's never a point in the series where humanity actually launches an attack on High Charity. You know, High Charity gets taken over by the Flood, and the Gravemind teleports Chief to High Charity, and Miranda take her cruiser to High Charity when they're on the Halo ring, but that's about it. So if you really think about it, this mission really didn't matter. It's like, it's not like, say for example, Rogue One, where we got to see the rebels that got the Death Star plans. That was a big deal because their sacrifice gave us the plans for how to take out the Death Star. Like, if this story was cut out, nothing would change. But I can't go any further talking about the bonus missions without addressing this cutscene. If you've seen any video criticizing this game, this cutscene was probably one of the first things they showed. And I can't justify this. This is awful. This is probably one of the worst cutscenes in the entire franchise. Yes, worse than anything in Halo 5, worse than anything in Infinite, worse than the Halo 3 to war scene. Like, this is gotta be at least top 3 worst cutscenes in all of Halo. This is terrible. This is like, this was the moment when I really had to stop and go, what the fuck are we doing? Like, I just have to take belt to ass for this cutscene for a quick moment. This is just I was like screaming at my screen. Alright, so first off, Chief catches a plasma grenade, a grenade known for literally sticking to its targets, and just throws it back. You know, lore inaccurate, but whatever. You know, I'll let it slide. But then, like, as they're in their little firefight, all the Covenant are just standing out in the open. You know, the lead's doing a little shimmy, but the tactics are just non-existent. And then Chief is missing shots on grunts that are like 2 feet in front of him. Like, guys, what are we doing? Like, Chief, you're supposed to be our guy, but right now you're acting like a bum. I think you need to start locking in. But speaking of which, where the cutscene really gets bad is then, like, the Prophet of Harmony just comes out of the open like he's trying to aura farm, and, you know, Chief and Johnson are like, what's a Prophet doing here? But I'm wondering, why aren't we shooting one of the Covenant leaders who's right out in the open? But no, then the Prophet just tells his Covenant to stop firing, and he starts monologuing about how gas all the Covenant are, even though we've been killing these guys for the last 30 minutes, and the whole time he's monologuing, you know, Johnson and Chief are not shooting him. Like, I'm just like, hey, shoot that guy.
Shoot that guy.
And then, you know, you have the scene of the brutes and them showing off the new rage feature that he has, and then Johnson makes a stupid line of like, sorry, Mr. Monologue, but we're on the clock. And it's like, why didn't you say that when you should have gone and shot him? In fact, why are you even like giving him a heads up? Why don't you just shoot him while he's monologuing? And of course, then he takes the shot, and then the brute jumps in front and blocks it. And I'm just like, what are we doing? This is so horribly directed. Like, literally, you could have had like the Prophet at least like have like some sort of shield generator or a shield pop up when they go to take the shot, and then they have no choice but to listen to him monologue. Literally, that one little change would have done so much for this cutscene. But no, it's when I hear that behind the scenes drama with like the studio pulling out and other people having to come to fix it, it's scenes like this where I believe it, because this looks like it was just not directed at all. This looks, and I've seen Halo source filmmaker films that are more well directed than this. That's one of the things you've probably seen if you've seen people criticize this game. Now, let's talk about the other thing. And this is one of those things in this review where I was like, okay, you gotta talk about this, but I really don't. And that's the character of Williams, which is such a shame because we finally have a new ODST character in a Halo game. I swear, ODSTs are one of my favorite things in Halo, and 343/Halo Studios has done a terrible job representing them. Helldivers representing them better, but yeah, here we have a character named Williams. She is unfortunately a big focus in these missions from the second mission onward, and she clearly has a bias for Spartans. And I will say up front, I don't like her character, but I do think the internet has exaggerated the hate for her. You know, she has been the poster child for this game is woke, this is just a girl boss who hates men and hates Spartans, and it's just like, dog, the amount of hate is so exaggerated that it almost makes me want to like this character more, because it's like, it just doesn't meet the hate hype. She's a poorly written character, but it's not woke. The whole hating Spartans thing is a thing. It's not present a lot in the games, but it is present in some of the books and in that one scene in one of the Halo Legends shorts. But yeah, that is technically lore accurate. I do think it's a little annoying how this is brought up while in the middle of a mission, because even despite their grudge, ODSTs and Spartans will lock in when they're on site. Though I will admit, to Williams' defense, she does also compliment Chief in numerous times as well. People will of course cut this out and only show you all the bad dialogue, but she will say stuff like, okay, I'm starting to believe the Spartan propaganda, or nicely done, or even the infamous scene where she's like, it takes more than UNSC propaganda and fancy armor to impress me, but then they cut out the second part in their videos where she says, nevertheless, thanks for the rescue. So it's like, yeah, she's kind of a dick sometimes, but she also has moments where she is genuinely trying to be nice. I do think they put too much attention onto this, and I do think if they were going to focus on this character a lot, they should have actually focused on her being a badass, because she does suffer from that cliche of a character saying they're a badass but not really doing a lot. There's a lot of scenes where they do stuff off screen, like when her and her, I guess she calls them her Robins, you know, her Marines and stuff. They're fighting off some Covenant and they take them all out off screen, and for some reason Williams ordered them all to pile up all the Covenant and basically pose so that when Chief and Johnson show up, they're aura farming, and it's just like, that was kind of cringe, I'm not gonna lie. Or when her and the Marines go through the Covenant ship to disable the shields while Johnson and Chief are outside flying the spaceships, it's like, I would have liked to at least see like a cutscene of them like giving their lives to take that shield down. That would have been kind of neat. But I also would have just liked to see like more emphasis on her background, because I didn't even know this until my third playthrough of this mission. But in the second mission, she actually talks about how like the Covenant just glassed her planet and kidnapped her so they could hunt her and her Marines for sport. I would have liked to see more of that actual trauma, and maybe even some justification for her bias for Spartans. Like maybe they called on Spartans for reinforcements, but the Spartans were on another mission and they just left them to die. Like, then we would have had some more justifiable reason for why she hates Spartans so much. But yeah, I think her character's not well written, but I think, of course, the woke witch hunts, you know, they needed a target face for this game, and, you know, she unfortunately was the perfect ammunition. So I think she is an exaggeratedly hated character, but I don't think she's a good character at all. Like, I would not compare her to like Dare or Miranda, but at the same time, you know, she's like more on par with like Sarah Palmer. On that note, a couple other things I would have liked to see them do with these bonus missions would be like, it would have been more interesting if we focused more on those experiments, if we saw more crazy experiments, like maybe gene splicing, like trying to mix species together. And it would have been cool if we had a moment where they broke out, and for the later missions we have to actually fight off these horrific experiments, because they're always talking about, we need to stop this ship and stop what they're doing, but it's like, what are they really doing that's that much different from the Covenant besides like having more raged out brutes? Like, there's nothing really out there or shocking. This isn't like Gears of War 2 when you go into that facility with all those like mutated humans and locusts in the jars and stuff. The thing that sucks about these bonus missions is they don't really offer anything to the lore, or especially Combat Evolved story. It would have been more interesting if we had some moments that flushed out Combat Evolved story. Like, for example, how did Johnson survive that attack against the Flood? It would have been neat to have a section where you play as Johnson escaping that. Or what did Chief and Johnson do after they got off the Halo ring? You know, it would have been cool to see something like that. Just something to flush out the story and offer some nice additional context.
That goat's killing you! Goat's on approach! Order! Ah! Goat is busted! Lousy clear!
Alright, so that's the presentation side of things. Now let's talk about the gameplay. After all, in the end of the day, we play games to have fun, so how was this game? Again, going back to positives, I will say there is a lot of welcomed features added to this game. The thing that definitely makes this the most of a remake versus a remaster is the included gameplay elements. Now, like I said, Halo 1 was not my favorite Halo because it was always weird going from 2 and 3 to Halo 1 and seeing a lot of features that I've gotten familiar with just not present in this game. And, you know, I get it. This is the first game, so it's more praise for those later games adding those features than it is a negative for the first game, but it always made it weird to go back to that game and not be able to do a lot of this stuff that they added now. So some of the things that they've added is being able to switch weapons with Marines. I love this feature in Halo. You know, you just give some Marines some power weapons like a sniper or a rocket launcher, have them be the passenger in your Warthog, and now your Warthog has like rocket capabilities. Or you just see a Marine with a assault rifle and you need more assault rifle ammo, so you take their assault rifle and mix it with yours. It's such a great gameplay element that, and it's just another reason why I love like having Marines on missions. I also love a lot of the vehicle mechanics that they added to the game, like being able to board and hijack vehicles, or being able to EMP vehicles or have your vehicle EMP'd. You know, that's again a classic feature brought to Halo CE. They've also brought in the seat switching. I will admit, it does feel unfinished because he just sort of teleports, but nevertheless, it is nice that you can switch from the driver's seat to the turret without having to get out. There's been a change to the power-ups. Before, when you stepped on them, they would automatically activate, but now you kind of store them and you can activate them whenever you want, kind of like armor abilities, but you know, they're one-time use. I like this change because now you can actually use them whenever you want, and you can be more strategic about when you're gonna pop your camo or overshield instead of having to use it on the spot when you might not need it. Of course, the most important feature that keeps Halo 1 from being a 10 out of 10 for me, you can now finally, and you know, to anyone who shits on this game, I dare you to criticize me for saying that this is a positive. You can honk the horn for the Warthog. Truly, we are living in AAA gaming. What a revelation. All jokes aside, though, I'm so happy I can do this now. You know, it just always brings joy to my life when I can honk that Warthog horn. And when I went to Halo 1 for the first time and found out I couldn't do it, I was like heartbroken, like, what? I can't honk the horn? But no, that's obviously more joking, but I am glad that was included. Now, some additions I'm a little more conflicted about, but I'm not necessarily like mad about, is sprint, ADS, and the changes to the shield mechanics. So the shield one I'm more so like okay with. They basically took out health packs and now you have the traditional shield regen. It's whatever. You know, I do think those health packs gave Halo 1 Classic some character, but at the same time, I like not having to worry about picking up health packs and just have regenerative health, so that's whatever. ADS, again, it's like, a lot of times I didn't really use it that much. I think the game is designed still in that classic 2001 way where it's like you don't really need to aim at a lot of stuff, but it is a nice feature to have for moments where you do need to just zoom in on something, especially when I was admiring the graphics for stuff like enemies. I would use that feature a lot for that stuff when I wanted to get closer and really read something or look at how an elite's face looked and stuff like that. Now, the big weird one is sprint. Now, this is probably going to be one of the biggest hot takes of this video. I'm really kind of over the whole sprint debate. When I was younger, I used to care more about it when Halo fans told me I was supposed to care about it. But looking back and having a few Halo games with sprint now, I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think it ruins that Holy Trinity classic Halo gameplay like a lot of people act like it does. I'm not going to be like some of those Halo fans I've been watching who just go, ugh, I used sprint in this game, ew, gross, ruins Halo. Quit acting childish. I get there are valid criticisms for sprint in Halo, but looking at games like Reach, 4, and Infinite, all those games still felt like Halo because those games built around sprint and balanced it. The only game where I felt like the movement was too much and didn't feel like Halo anymore was Halo 5. And even with Halo 5, the game can kind of be fun at times if you just pretend it's not a Halo game. This game, I have more mixed feelings on it because this game feels like the controls were made for modern Halo, but the levels and enemies are still stuck back in 2001. Like, they didn't redesign the enemies to react to your new like gameplay capabilities, and I'll go through this more when I talk about the AI, but for a lot of the combat sections, I actually didn't use sprint all that much. In fact, in some ways, it almost felt disorienting to use sprint because the arenas are too small to complement it a lot of the times. And I really feel like the base movement speed is fast enough where you don't really need sprint. But that said, and I say that with a big but, there are moments when I did use sprint, and that was mostly during traversal or going from combat section to combat section, breaking those long gaps between, or those massively large fields where you have to run across, or especially during backtracking, because even during the first half of the campaign, in missions like Silent Cartographer, for example, there's a lot of backtracking where you go somewhere and then you gotta go back. Being able to sprint and cut that time short so I can get to the next fight really did help with the pacing for the game, I feel like, in my opinion, in my personal opinion. As well as those gameplay additions, we also have some new weapons. Now, I will admit, a lot of these weapons are exclusive to the bonus missions, but you can still get access to them in the base game if you play the remix mode. But there is a good amount of new weapons in the base mode as well. A lot of the new weapons that were added were the energy sword, fuel rod, spiker, SMG, battle rifle, needle rifle, beam rifle, sentinel beam, and the brute plasma rifle. And I actually think most of these are pretty fun. If there's one thing I felt like this remake should have done that it did, was it added to the sandbox, which is nice. I would have liked to see some new vehicles as well, but then again, this game doesn't really have a lot of vehicle sections, I realized. Maybe like a couple Warthog runs and a tank section. Now, I do feel like the BR and the sword, they definitely felt a little nerfed. The sword's lunge is a lot shorter, and the BR just feels weak. I'm not a fan of it. And the SMG, I do feel like its inclusion was a little pointless since we don't have dual wielding. I think dual wielding could have been something they could have added to this that would have been interesting. And I forgot to mention this before, so I'll throw it in here. But I also kind of wish we got clamber. It's like we already have ADS and sprint, so we might as well have the other feature from Infinite that I actually love, which is clambering, being able to like climb up ledges. That would have helped me out a ton, especially for that one skull where you have to platform over a bunch of roundish pillars, and every time you fall you gotta run up that staircase again, which again, glad I had sprint for that, because that took me like 30 minutes even with sprint, going up that staircase over and over to try again. Like, that was annoying. So I can't imagine having to walk up there, but it also would have been nice to just be able to grab the ledge and pull myself up. But as far as my favorite weapons in this game, the shotgun is just goated. It's so good. The needle rifle is overpowered as hell. I actually am so happy we get to use the fuel rod. And even though it was nerfed, also the sword, because it was silly how you couldn't use those, but you could use the other Covenant weapons. But the fuel rod is so cool. I like that it has this burning green effect whenever it hits an area, and the whole area is just covered in green flames afterward. I hope that's a detail they keep in the future. And surprisingly, the assault rifle, I thought the assault rifle was going to be weaker because they cut down on the ammo count, but this thing just snipes people. It is really good. One weapon I was underwhelmed by as well, though, is the Magnum. The Magnum's still okay, but I just didn't get that same overpowered feeling I got from the original, and I think that's a big L. Now, as far as the BR Magnum, you know, I didn't stop to do like a headshot test with every weapon against enemies, so I don't know if this is just a feeling or if there's some actual statistical data showing that they were nerfed. Maybe it's just the weaker sound design that makes them feel weaker, but I don't know. I think they dropped the ball on the Magnum. Another addition we also got is a couple new enemies. Now, there's not as much to talk about here, but I already mentioned the brutes in the bonus missions. With this new like rage mechanic, I guess the Prophet of Harmony tried to control them with these devices, but if you shoot the devices, they'll go into complete rage mode and attack both you and the Covenant. Kind of like the brutes in Halo 2, but more aggressive. But I'm gonna be honest, they're probably the least fun enemy to fight in the game because they are so tanky. They're not difficult, they take so much ammunition to take down, and they have no like registered hit feedback like the other enemies where it's like they react to your shots. They were just annoying to fight, which is again why I love the needle rifle, because that was one of the few weapons that would just drop them quickly. Speaking of annoying enemies, guess who came back? And guess who's back? Back again. It's the Jackal snipers. I still have to do my legendary playthrough, but oh boy, am I definitely not sarcastically ecstatic to fight these assholes again. But one other big surprise appearance is the flood tanks from Halo 3. They're in this game too. Now, lore-wise, I've seen some people complain, why are they here? But I guess if we're playing devil's advocate, if you go on the cold storage map in Halo 3, some of them are in containments for study, so I think that was the lore explanation for why they're here. But regardless, it is nice to see them add an enemy to the flood for some variety, and it's kind of a nice segue to talk about the AI finally, because I do have mixed feelings about the AI. Now, for the most part, the Covenant pretty much play as you expect. There's really not that much differences between them in each Halo game. You know, grunts always run away in fear, or they'll try to grenade you. Jackals will block your shots with their shields and try to over plasma charge you. Elites kind of play this sort of dance of partly stealthy, partly aggressive. For the most part, they pretty much react as you would have expected by this point, which is kind of a bummer, because after 25 years, you think the enemies in this franchise would have evolved more gameplay-wise, but they do react a little differently than they did in the original game. I've heard some rumors that they used the Reach AI and Reach assets when making the AI for this game, and there are some hints that that shows. I noticed with the elites, they do the Reach elite thing where when you break their shields, they throw their hands in the air and go roar, and then they'll run at you and do the instant kill melee. Like, look, Reach is my favorite Halo game. I love 3 to death as well, and I can understand why people like that one more, but Reach will always be my GOAT. So I say this as a #1 Reach fan. Like, Reach AI is kind of weird, so I don't know if that was the choice for this one. The AI also it does weird decisions, like sometimes they'll just stand out in the open and not react when you're shooting at them. And with the Flood, I always felt like the Flood are less interesting to fight than the Covenant, because like all the Flood do is just rush you. But I do feel like there's something off about the Flood. I can't put my finger on it, but I don't know, they're a little too easy to fight. Maybe that will change when I do my Legendary playthrough, but so far, whenever the Flood show up, I rarely really have any problems. The only time they ever got challenging was when the Flood tank showed up. So again, that's why I thought its inclusion was pretty nice, even if there is some conflicting lore with its inclusion, because at least it kind of adds some variety to their gameplay. Yeah, and then with the Marine AI, I kind of talked about them already too, but I do feel like the Marine AI can also be a little stupid at times. They definitely do some weird stuff. None of these issues really like took that much away from my gameplay. I just felt that they felt very dated, which is unfortunate because this remake had a chance to really like give them more animations, make them more capable, make them more intelligent, but you can kind of tell in this aspect as well, they kind of rushed things and just sort of threw in what they had and gave us the same Covenant we've fought for 25 years. Now, talking about the levels, this is where I feel like the game really didn't experiment too much, despite being a claimed remake, but more so with the first half. Now, I will admit, in the first half of the game, there are like a few tweaked or added rooms or routes that kind of mix things up a little bit or cut down on repetition, but for the most part, for the first half of the game, it literally felt like almost the exact same game. For the most part, most of the routes that I knew to go were still there. Some people might like that and like that not a lot got changed, and some people might be bummed because they're going into this remake to see a reimagined Combat Evolved, and it might not feel that way. I think with the first half of the game, The only real noticeable change I could think of is when you go to fight the 2 hunters in the open field on Silent Cartographer, they actually let you take your Warthog up there, and I love that's an option, and I could just run around with my Warthog and have my Marines gun everything down, and that arena actually kind of works with the Warthog. It's pretty exciting, so yeah, I like that change, that's cool, but for the most part, you know, it felt like the same Halo I played 100 times. So depending on what you're looking for, that might sound great or that might sound disappointing. Now with the second half of the game, I do feel like Halo Studios got a little more ambitious with reworking some of the levels. I already talked about my feelings of how the original game recycled a lot of levels for the second half, but even levels like 343 Guilty Spark and especially the library really suffered from repeating rooms, repetition, and sometimes being a little difficult to navigate. But with the remake, I really do feel like they got rebalanced, some of those repetitious rooms got cut out, and I already mentioned how the flood biomass really helps to make each room feel a little more distinct and easier to navigate. But they also threw in a couple new rooms that kind of help break things up and even add a little bit to the gameplay. Like for the library, you have this section that's almost like a puzzle room where you have to turn on these light bridges, but you have to find the terminals. And I just thought these levels flowed a lot better, and even despite what I said about the Flood AI, I still thought these levels were a lot more fun to play than the previous versions we've had. Combine that with what I said with the visuals, the flood biomass, and this game being more true to the original game's darker tone, and this is probably the closest 343 Guilty Spark and the library have gotten to actually being about as scary as Halo fans always hype up with those missions. I'm not gonna lie, I never was like as scared by the Flood in their introduction as other people in the fandom were, but these are definitely the closest. Even the final mission, the Maw, got reworked in a pretty nice way. It always bugged me how in the original and anniversary, even though the Pillar of Autumn crashed, it looks so similar to when it was still in space. But now in this version, it's a lot more torn up, there's more fire. The whole place looks like it's gone through hell, both figuratively and literally. And that final Warthog run, just 10 out of 10, absolute cinema. It's just as good, if not better than the original, and I love the inclusion of getting to the middle of the ship and actually seeing it all ripped apart and half buried in the sand. Foe hammers just flying overhead of you, being chased by banshees as you're driving by. It's so epic. As far as those 3 missions go, I gotta applaud this game. It did a fantastic job with that. Now, as for the bonus missions, I really can't say the same. Now, when I first played through 3D's missions, I had much higher expectations and I hated them. I thought they were repetitive, I thought they were boring, but upon replaying them, they're not that bad. They're nothing to write home about, but they're fine. That said, they don't do too much to really spice things up either. And I will say, the last thing we needed was more Covenant ship missions, because the one aspect of Unreal Engine 5 that I think they did fall flat on was redesigning the Covenant ships, because everything is purple, everything still looks the same, and having more missions of that just kind of bored me a little bit. We do get a few breaks from that, like Mission 2 is probably my favorite of the 3, just because I love that hunting ground area. That area actually looks really good. It would have been nice if we got to see more unique areas besides just the Covenant ship. But yeah, as far as like gameplay sequences, you know, there's that one section where you're on like that tram cart fighting enemies, that's okay. And I think that's pretty much it. Actually, yeah, the rest is just standard Halo combat, which again, gameplay, it's hard to hate on classic Halo gameplay. It's still that holy trinity in the end of the day, but there's really not that much different besides like the ship combat in the end, which that was one of the things that I was excited about because I love the ship combat in Reach and 4, and I've always said Halo should do like a Battlefront 2 style multiplayer mode where it starts with space battles and then whoever wins, you have to invade their ship and have your standard Halo combat. So it would be like an evolved version of Invasion from Reach. I've always wanted something like that. As far as the space mission we got here, it's passable. It's nice to have a change of pace from the repetitive sections, but you really don't do much. You blow up some turrets on the Covenant ship and admire Unreal Engine 5's explosion effects, and then you shoot some spaceships and protect a Spirit getting survivors away, and a UNSC ship that comes in, which, by the way, I'm 99% sure you don't even actually have to destroy those ships. They could ram into the UNSC ship and nothing will change, so that's sort of lame, but it was also sort of nice. I didn't have to worry about that because at that point I just kind of wanted to get done with it. So it's whatever. The Prophet of Harmony escapes and the game literally keeps you from stopping him, which is lame. You know, it would have been nice to at least get a Prophet kill in there, but I guess he'll live to never show up again apparently. But yeah, overall the bonus missions, like gameplay wise, they're forgettable but passable, and then story wise they're just badly written filler. So yeah, if you're going into this game just for those bonus missions, you're gonna be disappointed, but if you're playing the base game, like, I think you'll still enjoy it, as long as you're not like too up in arms about all those more modern Halo mechanics thrown in. But at the same time, I'm not looking for a remaster. We have a remaster of Halo CE already. If you're gonna make a remake, I want it to be re-envisioned like what Capcom is doing with the Resident Evil remakes. I mean, look at Resident Evil 2 versus Resident Evil 2 remake. They're like different games, and yet Resident Evil 2 remake still keeps true to what made the original so great, while still offering a lot of great new mechanics and modernized tech. Even the original and remake versions of Resident Evil 4 still feel like different games, as the original was more of a corny, almost Bond-filmed like action game but with zombies, and the remake added a lot more survival horror and tension while still not losing its identity. That's what I wanted with this remake, but as is, it feels like it added a lot of stuff that I've come to expect from other Halo games, but it also didn't really give me much new that I haven't seen before. So I'm partially disappointed, but at the same time, I guess I am sort of happy that it was pretty faithful, and I don't mind most of the inclusions. Now, let's talk about the game's replayability. After all, this is the third version of Halo CE, so why would you want to pick this up over, say, the original version or MCC? So, we've already talked about the bonus missions, so we're going to kind of skim past that, but overall, the campaign, I'd say I beat everything within somewhere between 10 to 14 hours, but you also have Remix mode, and it's kind of a stretch to call it a mode, but essentially it's the campaign, but now all the enemies are randomized and you get some of the enemies and weapons from the bonus missions. And I will admit, for one playthrough, I thought this was kind of funny, kind of neat. You know, you got Flood in the Pillar of Autumn or Covenant in the Flood missions. You go around a corner to jump a grunt, and it turns out to be a hunter this time who jumps you, or you just see enemies in goofy places. I had some neat fun with this for a little bit, but it's nothing I would warrant more than maybe like 1 or 2 playthroughs, especially since we already have skulls that add more modifiers to your game. And speaking of skulls, they did expand the number of skulls in the game and changed their placement. There's a couple neat ones, including my favorite, which is the third-person skull. Just like with Resident Evil Requiem, I like when games give you the option between first and third person. Out of everything in this game, I feel like this edition really freshened things up and gave me a new way to play CE, so I really liked this. And there's terminals you can find that offer additional lore. I haven't read these, but apparently there's some good stuff in there, so that's something to consider. They also raised the player count for co-op from 2 to 4 and even added an extra seat in the Warthog for that 4th player. So if you have some buddies willing to try this out for you, you could probably squeeze in a couple more playthroughs through that. And that's it. Wait, what? No, that can't be it. Is there no scoring? No theater mode? No timer? Did they give us anything else? A firefight? Is there multiplayer? Nope. No multiplayer. How much do they want for this again?
Oh my goodness!
Oh, this is local!
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this might be my biggest issue with this game out of everything we've talked about, even more than like the cutscenes or the quality control, because a lot of those other issues I could be more forgiving if we at least had the multiplayer on top of the campaign, but $50 just for the campaign? Or $80 if you decided to get that deluxe edition for 5 extra skins? And speaking of skins, yeah, the game has customizable armor and weapon skins, but nothing is earned in-game. They're either paid skins or they're promo codes, which luckily at some of them you can get for free and they're not too difficult, but still, it would have added so much replay value if you could earn skins through achievements, beating the game on different difficulties or challenges. But not having multiplayer in particular, that's what really hurts this game in my opinion. I don't know if this was because they didn't want to interfere with the player numbers for some of their other games like MCC or Infinite, but to this date, despite having not just this remake but a remaster of CE, the multiplayer for CE has yet to be remade, unless you count when they re-released Reach versions of some of the maps for Halo Reach, which I don't really count that. There's still an incentive to play the original game over these other versions, or at least play it through MCC. And that's the other thing. Why get this when you can just get MCC for $10 less? You get Combat Evolved's campaign and the multiplayer, and you get the campaign, multiplayer, and other features of 5 other games on top of it. Now, if you are still interested in trying this game out, whether that be because it's your first Halo game, or you have played Halo before but you just want something different and new, I would highly recommend Game Pass over anything else. Because while the base price is $50, if you already have Game Pass, whether that be for this game or just other games, you're only paying like $16 a month. So I'd say $16 is way more a fair price for this game than $50 or $80. At most, I would say this game is worth $30. My buddy was gonna buy it through Steam, but me and my other friend convinced him to get it through Game Pass, and I think he made the right choice doing that. Because, yeah, if you get it through Steam, you can at least mod the game to make it more how you want it to be, but if you're on Steam, you might as well just get MCC. Same thing if you're on Xbox and you don't have Game Pass. Now, if you're on PlayStation, this is your only Halo game. With the recent news of Xbox making their games exclusive again and not porting them to PlayStation, this might be the only Halo game you ever get. So, if that's your situation, I would honestly just wait for like a sale or something. Honestly, speaking of MCC, I feel like they should have just ported that to PlayStation. I feel like that would have been a much smarter decision. I mean, you could have increased MCC's player numbers, you could have made PlayStation, Xbox, and PC all cross-platform. It would have been just a slam dunk, but like I said, with the recent news, that's looking like a make-believe fantasy at this point. Finally, before we wrap up with my final thoughts, I wanted to devote the last part of this section toward sort of debunking or looking through some myths or rumors that I've been hearing about this game, some of which are just straight up misinformation and a lot of grifters are just running with it, and a lot of these criticisms or fake rumors and myths are basically overshadowing genuine constructive criticism that this game and the overall franchise really need. So before these spread any more like wildfire, I wanted to take a moment to kind of look through these and see if they're bullshit or not. While talking about these, some of these are related to woke allegations. Now, I feel like the term woke has severely lost all meaning and it's just used so loosely. Personally, I don't think this game is that woke. Trust me, I've seen games that truly like ham-fist woke agendas into them, and this just did not feel like one of them in my opinion. There's a video by a YouTuber named Dude with an Opinion. He kind of goes more into this particular topic with the Halo community, so I'm gonna kind of link his video below and kind of let him take the mic on that, but we're gonna more so focus on the more statistical and factual stuff, and I'll leave the political sensitive topic to him. The first and arguably most controversial topic on this list I want to tackle is how in the Pillar of Autumn Bridge, apparently the women are invincible and not killable, but the men are, including Captain Keyes, who's a canonically important character. I'm sorry I have to do this, sir, but trust me, this is way better than your original fate.
What the hell are you doing?
And as you can imagine, this kind of appears sexist towards men, and a lot of people ran with this to speak out their outrage. And I've heard some people say it's real and some people say it was fake, so I took it upon myself to actually test this, and it is in fact fake, but I can understand why people were fooled into thinking it's real, because there is a glitch where if you shoot at the women NPCs first, they do seem invincible, but after I killed one of the men NPCs and tried again on one of the women, they were able to be killed. Now, for most people, this is probably not going to matter to you, but I figure I'd tackle this since a lot of people were outraged about it, and I even tested this outside of the first mission, and yes, you can kill both genders of Marines equally, which is kind of a weird thing to talk about, but yeah, that's debunked. Staying on the topic of men versus women, there was a post about a male to female ratio slider for the Marines in the settings. This is 100% fake. Here's a side-by-side if you don't believe me. I'm pretty sure whoever made this originally meant it as like a shit post, but surprise surprise, a lot of people took this serious and used it as more ammunition against this game, so that is also fake. Another thing that isn't necessarily untrue, but has been greatly exaggerated, is some recent layoffs at Halo Studios. After the game launched, there was a lot of headlines about Halo Studios going through a lot of layoffs, and this one I actually kind of bought into for a little bit because it really didn't surprise me. We see so many developer layoffs in the gaming industry lately. Like, for example, what happened with the Battlefield devs, a bunch of them got laid off, but then their CEO got a massive multi-million-dollar bonus, which is screwed up on so many levels. But it turns out it wasn't really any full-time employees or any large number of employees who got laid off. It was literally just a couple contractors who were pretty much on their way out anyway, because if you don't know the difference between like full-time developers and contractors, or like contractors are basically like temporary employees who only work for like a couple months before they cycle out, which is the same kind of stuff that screwed over Halo Infinite, so it saddens me they're still doing that kind of process for their flagship franchise. But yeah, the amount of people who got laid off was super exaggerated, and for better or worse, this does not mean Halo Studios is getting shut down anytime soon. And the final thing I want to talk about is this game a financial failure? Now, I had to redo this part because originally this was kind of more up in the air and people were just kind of making assumptions, but recently we did get some actual statistical data that actually I would say confirms that this game is struggling. So from what I could look up, the game has roughly a $120 to $165 million budget, and a lot of people were assuming it was immediately a failure because of Steam charts. Now, as far as games that judge based on their Steam charts, I think this was the worst game you could have judged it on because there's so many factors why Steam charts are irrelevant for this game. For one, most people are playing on Game Pass. The game has no multiplayer or side modes and is a single player only game, so naturally people won't be replaying this as much as say a multiplayer game or a massive and lengthy open world game. And this is already the third version of CE, so people aren't exactly running to try this like if it was say a Halo 3 remake. But with that said, there has been some analytical data that's come out, and it seems that the game has only really made around 67 million across all platforms. So it isn't exactly making its money back. The game just came out, so there is still time for it to turn a profit, but yeah, I think we can at least say that this myth is actually more or less true. So don't worry, I'm not debunking everything. There are some things that are true, but again, this was something that was being exaggerated with no proof in the past, and I'm only bringing it up now because we actually got some concrete evidence.
Oh, I see. The coordinate data needs to be... Right, sorry.
But in conclusion, while I do have major issues with this game, I did want to at least judge it fairly and hopefully add another more informative review that kind of talks about the more legitimate issues, or even like giving the game fair praise than just clickbait drama. But again, I will say this game does have a lot of issues. The direction with the cutscenes, the voice acting, the audio, and the AI, it all feels rushed. The bonus missions really don't contribute much to the franchise or the replay value besides just more Halo content to play. I think the first half of the game, personally, it didn't do enough to justify itself as a remake and almost felt more like another remaster. While it's easy to turn off a lot of those annoying HUD elements, I do worry about the fact that a lot of those HUD elements kind of tease on what the next Halo game might be. If the next Halo game is that handholdy, that might get really annoying. And of course, that price tag. A lot of these other issues I would have been probably less harsh about if that price tag was something like at $20 or at most $30, but $50 just for the campaign when MCC is literally $40? That was a dumb decision. That probably killed this game more than anything. But with all that said, I also want to be fair because I don't think this is the worst thing ever or an abomination like other people are saying. And yeah, I think this remake does do things really well that I actually prefer over the original. Like some of those later missions like 3 for 3 Guilty Spark, the Library, or the Maw are probably my favorite versions of these missions for CE. They also added a lot of features that I've expected from other Halo games that I'm glad are finally here, like switching weapons with Marines, the shield system, hijacking, EMPing vehicles, 4-player co-op, and of course, honking the Warthog horn. It gets an additional point just for that. But, you know, and also just increasing the sandbox, adding more weapons and more enemies. I love that we added more skulls, especially the third-person skull. And at the end of the day, it's still Halo. Even if you don't like any of those additions, if you're the most angry person ever, Halo is still Halo. Especially if you've never played CE, you're probably gonna have a blast. But despite all of the things I like about the game, This definitely could have been polished more, it could have been given a lot more content, and it definitely could have done more to actually reinvent CE and make it feel like more of a modern and expanded game. For that reason, personally, I'd say this is a 6 out of 10. Maybe a 7 if this is your first time playing CE. For me, I've played this game 100 times, both through the original version and Anniversary, so I got some mild new experiences, but yeah, it was nice to come back to Halo again, but it is still sad to see the Halo community so hostile to each other since the Infinite days. I get wanting to support your franchise, and I get that that means different things to different fans. Some people think that to keep Halo alive, you gotta keep supporting the games and just be happy with what you got, while other fans know what we had and feel so frustrated by the direction and that they'll literally take it out on people who are enjoying the newer games. I do think there are people on both sides who are just taking this way too serious. You know, calling each other grifter, larper, you just like bottom of the barrel slop, or oh, you're not happy with anything and why are you even still here? And I know there are normal people in the community who are trying to enjoy the series but do have valid issues and criticism, but those more obnoxious people are just drowning them out and getting them dragged into their crowd involuntarily. But you combine that with like all the misinformation and all the woke witch hunting, just drowning out the more important topics to discuss about this game, and it's like, that's why I wanted to make this review, just to filter out the white noise and give something a little more fair, give the game a fair trial, and recognize those real issues, as well as give it some deserved praise. But yeah, I had fun with this game, but it is just another version of CE, so it's not something I'm gonna stick with for a while, and it is certainly not something worth getting this heated over. But anywho, that is my review. I appreciate you guys watching. I apologize for all the delays and even the runtime for this video. There was a lot for me to yap about and edit and so little time, especially with work, so I definitely appreciate the time you guys spent both waiting for this video and actually watching it. And yeah, as long as we can be civil in the comments, let me know what you think of Combat Evolved. Did you think it was a massive disappointment, or are you still managing to have fun with the game, either alone or with friends? Is this your first time playing CE? And which remake version of CE did you guys prefer, Anniversary or this? Because Anniversary is a lot more faithful to the original as far as literal one-to-one, but this does add some things that I've always wanted to see in CE. So going back to classic CE, there's a couple things I'm gonna miss not being able to do again. But with that said, next week I do have a Gears of War video planned, so stay tuned for that. And don't really have a clever way to end this video, so here's a clip of Johnson losing his shit.
Whoa! He's gone rampant! Get him, he's crazy! Stupid, stupid, stupid! Take him out! He's gone rampant! Get him, he's crazy! He's gone rampant! Charge! Take him out! He's gone rampant! Get him, he's crazy! He's gone rampant! Getting another ring! Take him out! Get him, he's crazy! He's gone rampant! Take him out!